I saw this last stream, which was earlier today. My uncle Donald Trump told me disabled Americans like my son, quote, should just die, which is an interesting one, you know. I don't talk about ableism that much because ableism is a very real problem in a wide variety of ways. The Nazis, the original Nazis, would create propaganda encouraging the German public to accept the idea of the euthanization or sterilization of disabled people or people with hereditary defects because it was seen as a burden on the public good. Yes, useless eaters was the idea. And in modern day America, obviously ableism is very alive and well. It's obviously not reached that point. You know, that's not the bar we've hit quite yet, but it's still a very real issue. And I do think it's worth remembering that in a fascist America, it is insanely easy to immediately turn to this. It's just not very rhetorically effective on the campaign trail. You know what I mean? Like, the demonization of disabled people isn't something that's going to win you votes in America today. It's something that you can very easily defer to when you have the ability to, though. It kind of comes naturally because disabled people are disabled, meaning that in many cases, all you have to do to hurt them isn't even to do something like against them, but rather to remove things being done for them, like, you know, the ADA. There are a number of provisions that you could alter, remove, damage that would... I'll read the article. When my uncle was elected president, I recognized what a highly privileged position I would be in. I'd have some access to the White House. And as long as that was true, I wanted to make sure I used that access for something positive. I was eager to champion something my wife, Lisa, and I were deeply passionate about, something we lived every day: the challenges for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. One thing that a lot of people, especially fascists, don't like to acknowledge is, first of all, the median internet neo-Nazi is some kind of disabled, okay? You motherfuckers are not getting pussy. It shows in your posts. Second of all, many of history's greatest men were quirked up autistic baddies, okay? If you look back at great inventors, great statesmen, great artists, you will not find like a big collection of extremely well-adjusted, socially normalized individuals, okay? A lot of them were varying between somewhat mentally abnormal to extremely mentally ill. And you know, they made their marks in history, so... Albert Einstein, dude, it's literally like all of them, basically. Like Tesla and Einstein and Isaac Newton are easy, clear one, but like basically any major artist. It's crazy, dude. Like, it's... Our son William, our third child, was born on June 30th, 1999. Within 24 hours, he went from seemingly healthy to fighting for his life in the NICU. Raising him was different from the start. William was diagnosed at 3 months with infantile spasms, a rare seizure disorder, which in William's case altered his development physically and cognitively. We had so many questions. What would the future hold for someone like William? How far could he go? How much could he learn? Would he ever have the chance to do the things that other children do? We just didn't know. It took 15 years before his medical team could accurately pinpoint the cause of his condition. A KCNQ2 mutation, a genetic misfire that the doctors called a potassium channel deletion. In our journey with William, Lisa and I had become close to some truly inspiring parents and dedicated advocates who are doing amazing work to improve the day-to-day reality for families like ours. It's a huge lift for caregivers, not to mention the constant need to mitigate expenses. There are so many different demands and challenges, but there are things that the government could do. Some things that can only be done by the government, both federal and state. We wanted to bring knowledgeable people to the White House to see if we could make a difference. Lisa reached out to my cousin Ivanka, there we go, who was working in the White House as an advisor to the president. Ivanka got right back to her and said she'd be happy to help. She provided a contact for Ben Carson, the retired neurosurgeon who was Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Right. We brought several talented advocates with us for a meeting with Carson and members of his senior staff in April 2017. If ever you need further evidence of intelligence being compartmentalized, never forget that Ben Carson, pyramids were grain silo storage. Ben Carson was not only a talented neurosurgeon, but a world-leading neurosurgeon. Look, I said as we got started, I'm the least important person in the room. I wanted the focus to be on the others who knew a lot more than I did. They immediately started floating ideas, which was exactly why we were there. Our collective voice was being heard. It was a start. Man, look at the bloom on this photo. The white on the shirt and cuffs are radiating. This is, the camera was doing something special here. In January 2020, just before COVID hit, Lisa, myself, and a team of advocates met with Chris Neely, who headed the President's Committee for People with Intellectual Disabilities, a much-needed federal advisory committee that promotes policies and initiatives that support independent and lifelong inclusion. Can I throw in a bit of an anecdote here? One of the most difficult bonds to break is the bond between parents and children. Now, I'm not going to promote the idea that all parents are good or that family is like innately good. Like any of that, I'm not doing any of that stuff, okay? There are plenty of piece of shit deadbeat parents. Lots of LGBTQ kids get kicked out in the street. However, let's be real here. Like, generally speaking, there is a, generally speaking, there is a rapport built there. I think that in America today, even though the Republicans often run on unimaginable, obvious cruelty, if the Republicans came out and they said, yeah, as of now, if you have an autistic child, we'll no longer provide you any like family related or welfare benefits, and we will cut, we'll no longer provide you tax benefits for marriage because, you have dysgenic genes and you produce autistic children and we don't want that for the future of the nation or whatever the else, like, I don't think the American people at this moment have strong tolerance for many types of open cruelty that are directed at people that are perceived to be weaker than them. Even with the cruelty directed at, say, gay or trans people, it has to be couched behind some extra bulwark, some step between. It's not, the Republican Party is not out there saying, trans people are evil. There are plenty of accounts that say it, and they imply it strongly, but the official line is, trans people promote transgender ideology, which is grooming our children, which is evil. I know that seems like a meaningless distinction, and in practice it often is, but it's important for them to construct a mythology in which they are defending themselves against perceived wrongdoing. Exactly, Benjamin. Even a lot of people who are obviously racist can't accept the idea that they just hate X race. Instead, they have to create a narrative where their racism is justified by some perceived wrongdoing by the race they don't like. This is often the case. When you ask people about their beliefs on race, racists will almost never just admit to being racist. They'll say, well, what can you do? X group of people keeps doing Y. They can't accept that they're the aggressors in the situation. It's always, there's always an excuse. There's always we're defending ourselves against this thing. It's a cowardly way of thinking about things, but it also reveals a lot about the human psyche, in that in this environment now, right now in America today, there's no stomach for being the direct perpetuators of cruelty. With the Nazis, they couldn't just say, we hate disabled people. What they had to say was, disabled people are harming the state, harming the nation, by being worthless, eaters, by consuming without producing. Even with the Jews, they had to construct entire mythologies of all the shit they imagined Jewish people were doing. The idea that World War I was only lost because of Jewish internal interference and how they were the ones who did the Great Depression and blah, blah, blah. Yes, today Netanyahu will justify any imaginable cruelty against Palestinian children as long as it's couched in the belief that they're defending themselves against Hamas. The reason I say all of this is because the construction of this narrative, this what can you do to justify bigotry narrative, it's essential to the myth making, and it's not easy to explicitly do against disabled people because it's really difficult to come up with a politically convincing narrative about how autistic children are destroying the union. It's just not easy. Is it impossible? No, but it's still not easy. Which is one of the reasons why I think people who are disabled are often the victims of poor policy, but they're rarely directly targeted. They're rarely roped into the rhetoric, Does that make any sense? I'm trying to explain why I think disabled people are at great threat by reactionary policy, even though the reactionary rhetoric, the narrative, will very rarely go like explicitly, we need to deal with the disabled people. You'll almost never hear that because it's really difficult to create that narrative. Okay, yeah, a bit of a ramble, but you know. And yes, there are a lot of Republican... Man, do you have any idea how many Republican voters there are who either are related to or are themselves some kind of disabled, welfare-reliant, like, I don't know, redneck, older white person or whatever? There are so many. Go out into any, like, poor, white, rural county, and you will find an enormous number of white people age, like, 50 and up who are not in very good health and who do rely on the state heavily for their continued existence, but still vote for people who are promising to take away their, you know, medical, you know, their access to medicine. Anyway, here. Veterans tend to be physically disabled. Yeah. Keep getting on the wrong sides of IEDs. I mean, I've been fighting in the meme war down there in the trenches for what feels like forever now. And I've never gotten hit by one, but, you know, skill issue. Also, people can become disabled, Vosh. It's super hard because most people understand they're one accident away from... I'm assuming you mean most people don't understand they're one accident away from losing an arm or something. Yeah, a lot of people don't think of themselves as potentially disabled, which everyone should. Like, everyone is one bad day away from being disabled, right? Like, it's literally, like, in like minor ways and in severe ways. You could have the genes for disability like, already coded into you, and it could activate tomorrow. You have no idea, man. You have no idea. You have no clue. You could already have cancer, dude. Did you get tested for it today? You have no idea. This is scary to think about. Yeah, life is fragile, you know, which is why we should try to build society in a way that is compassionate towards people, even people who have natural disadvantages, you know? This is the, what do they call it? The thin veil? Is that what it's called? You should attempt to get, like, imagine that you are unborn. You are like an ephemeral ghost-like entity, and you are trying to assess the quality of a society based on your entry into it. And you enter into it by crossing the veil, not knowing who you will be born as. Is America a good society when like half of the people in this country live in debt? That you have like a what, 1 in something chance to be in poverty, or 1 in something chance to be homeless? You could end up being the president of the United States. You could end up being a junkie living in the alley behind the dentist clinic. You have no idea. It's one way of determining whether or not a society is good. This is a way in which America is kind of sort of a little bit of a shithole compared to a country like, say, Finland. Finland is, in a lot of ways, let's be clear here, gay and cringe. We are not Nordic stans. We are not cringe like Bernie Kratz, who learned what socialism was from Bernie memes in 2016. Thank you. But they got a lot less homeless people, man. A lot less. We discussed the need for all medical schools to include courses that focus on people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We emphasized how cruel it was for hospitals and other acute care facilities to help patients transition from, how crucial it was to transition from pediatric to adult services. We emphasized the importance of collecting sufficient data to explain medically complex disorders. This was not about more government spending. It was about smarter investing in greater efficiency. I want more government spending, man. But sure, whatever, phrase it however you want. We spent the next few months making calls and talking with officials and gathering our own recommendations, giving special attention to the critical need for housing support for people with disabilities. We were back in Washington in May. By this time, COVID was raging. We were all masked up and COVID tested on the way into the White House cabinet room. Once we got inside, we sat down with Alex Azar, the administration's Secretary of Health and Human Services, and Brett Giroir, the Assistant Secretary for Health, both of whom served on the White House Coronavirus Task Force. The promising agency motto stated, HHS, enhancing the health and well-being of all Americans. Sharp, direct, and to the point, Azar exhibited my kind of efficiency with no time to waste. His first question was, okay, why are you here? I made a brief introduction. Our group included a leading doctor and several highly qualified advocates. What followed was a great discussion. Something clicked with Giroir. An idea for a program everyone could agree on that would cut through the bureaucracy and control costs and also yield better and more efficient medical outcomes. Well, that sounds nice. Excellent, we were making progress. Really appreciate your coming in, Azar finally said, more warmly than he had sounded at the start. I know we're going to see the president. The meeting I had assumed would be a quick handshake hello with Donald had turned into a 45-minute discussion in the Oval Office with all of us, Azar, Giroir, the advocates, and me. I never expected to be there so long. Donald seemed engaged, especially when several people in our group spoke about the heart-wrenching and expensive efforts they'd made to care for their profoundly disabled family members, who were constantly in and out of the hospital and living with complex arrays of challenges. Donald was still Donald, of course. He bounced from subject to subject, disability to the stock market and back to disability. But promisingly, Donald seemed genuinely curious regarding the depth of medical needs across the U.S. and the individual challenges these families faced. He told the secretary and the assistant secretary to stay in touch with our group and to be supportive. After I left the office, I was standing with the others near the side entrance to the West Wing when Donald's assistant caught up with me. Quote, "Your uncle would like to see you," she said. Azar was still in the Oval Office when I walked back in. "Hey, pal," Donald said. "How's everything going?" "Good," I said. "I appreciate your meeting with us." "Sure, happy to do it." He sounded interested and even concerned. I thought he had been touched by what the doctors and advocates in the meeting had just shared about their journey with their parents and their own family members. But I was wrong. "Those people," Donald said, trailing off, "the shape they're in, all the expenses, maybe those kinds of people should just die." I truly did not know what to say. He was talking about expenses. We were talking about human lives. For Donald, I think it really was about the expenses, even though we were there to talk about efficiencies, smarter investments, and human dignity. I turned and walked away. Pretty on brand, huh? Definitely, New York businessman pilled. Demonic? Yeah, well, you know, you guys don't need a spiel from me about how Donald Trump is evil and doesn't care about anyone other than himself, and he's a rapist and he's a pedophile and a racist and a sexist. So, because all these things are true and you know them. We don't really talk about disability and ableism that much, partly because, let's be fair, ableism discussions online, you've got a 50-50 chance of things just being too soy from the onset. People talk about racism, sexism. Okay, I say 1 in 4 chance of soy. Ableism, you know, all I'm saying is, you know how it is. Yeah, knowers will know, okay? If you know, you know. Not to say that I'm not on the side of better treatment of disabled people, you know, in spite of what some may claim, some of the words that I use. I'm actually a pretty aggressive advocate for that sort of thing. Not only because I believe in, you know, the innate dignity of humanity and the moral righteousness of taking care of people, but also because it's objectively more efficient to handle disabled people better than we do now. Like, one of the most obvious examples of this is the fact that the government will provide you a stipend if you're disabled, if you can prove it and go through the bureaucracy, but you lose it if you ever have assets which exceed $2,000, meaning that if you're disabled and you need checks from the government and you're getting checks from the government and you don't want to lose those checks from the government, you can never own more than $2,000 of a thing. Not just $2,000 in the bank. If you own a car, no. If you own an e-bike, no. If you own a nice computer, no. That's just the one ownership, by the way. Factor in your owning clothes, factor in anything, like literally like you own anything. $2,000 for the total combined assets of your entire life. Yeah, do you have a PS5? That's like 1/4 of your government Yeah, do you have a bed with does your disability require that you sleep on a nice bed because of like back pain? Well, congratulations, bucko. That's it right there, you know? Yeah, your wheelchair? Yep, Vosh, I'm an SSI and it's a huge headache. And you're a tier 4 sub. Dusty Poncho, that's smart. Dumping your excess income into worthless shit so that the government can't use it against you and take away your SSI checks. I respect it. Yeah, high IQ move right there. The government will not. My man's hiding money all over the place. You know, when he needs that money back again, he just sends a PayPal charge back to me, and he's like, "Yeah, sorry, I can't afford this tier 4 sub. Can I have the money back?" And me, a softie, I'm like, "Okay," and he's like, you know, it's like a loan. The application process is also really long and difficult and often requires you to debase yourself. Yeah, the application process is 2 orderlies like hit you with sticks and say like, "Can you get up now? Can you get up now?" And if you do get up, they say you're not disabled and you lose the money. More or less. Don't fact check me on that. I think I'm right. Bosch, my neighbor's wife, had to go live in an assisted living facility because they have assets. He has to pay $10K a month. His wife wants to die because he's slowly selling his farm to pay it. Yeah, that's horrible, you know? It's also one of the reasons why Republicans don't want to be out and about with it, because disability does not disproportionately strike left-leaning people As we all know, women are woke. Black people, woke. Hispanic people, woke. Asian people, it depends on which side of the current race war in the city they're in is going, okay? But generally speaking, disproportionately woke, okay? But disabled people and the relatives thereof, totally broad, like across the spectrum, literally and figuratively, you know? You can't really rope them into the greater culture war, because who's gonna be convinced through the rhetoric of the Republican Party, like, yeah, the real enemy of the American people is the, you know, the greedy disabled grandmother that I have who gets government benefits. I don't think so. Not likely. We're not at Nazi levels of dehumanization of the disabled. All I'm saying is that, like, you don't have to reach that level for things to get really bad or worse. I mean, as people have been pointing out, and let me just refresh my memory really quickly, because I don't remember necessarily if this is the case. Project 2025 does, in fact, want to remove the American Disability Association, right? Is that not correct? It calls for removing enforcement of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, a landmark federal law that ensures students with disabilities are entitled to a free, appropriate education. Nice. That's cool. That's demonic. Yeah, well, the people who wrote Project 2025, to be clear, are Nazis. And I don't mean that euphemistically. The Heritage Foundation used to be like a pseudo-libertarian neocon think tank. They were writing articles about how, like, you know, immigration actually isn't that bad. When they realized, after MAGA, when they realized that wasn't, like, no one was listening to them anymore. No, the Republican Party wasn't listening to them anymore. Why would they? Their messaging was entirely out of line with the Republican messaging. They freaked out and had a reorganization, and when the dust cleared, the people who do the messaging at the Heritage Foundation now are history's greatest monsters. I'm really sorry. They're genuinely evil, and they hate you. They hate you more than you could possibly imagine. They hate you more than you love anyone. It's their entire life. The ADA is better than what some of Europe has. That's actually true. One thing I was really surprised by in Barcelona is that the accessibility of some of their, like, bus metro services, all I'm saying is I would not enjoy Barcelona very much if I had a wheelchair. In most American cities that I've been to, I feel like being in a wheelchair wouldn't affect my enjoyment that much, because the ADA, I mean, you've got a lot of ramps, elevators, you know, they're required to, but in Barcelona, man, holy shit, you know? Yeah, Europe does direct payments better, but building standards are worse. I mean, have you guys ever wondered why basically every single sidewalk curb in America has, like, a curve, a dip at the corner? It didn't used to be like that. And if you look at like older videos or photos of, like, people walking around Brooklyn or New York or whatever, they didn't have that. The reason why that's on every curb in the entire nation, I mean, we're talking like millions of dips in the curve, is for wheelchair users. The fact that that was applied, and it's a good decision anyway, because you could be, like, pushing a cart or whatever, but it was mandated because of that. And notice how it's made everyone's life better. Like, because we lowered the bar to make the curb easy and accessible to people in wheelchairs, we produced a social outcome that benefited everybody. Now you no longer have to worry about, like, pushing a cart or pushing a stroller with, like, a kid, you know? Like, the accessibility helped everyone. Every building past a certain height in America is required to have an elevator. Are you, a person who's likely not in a wheelchair, complaining about that? Like, I don't know, man. My legs work fine, and sometimes I really like having an elevator. I think it's pretty cool, actually. It benefits everybody. Everybody's life is better when we try to make society better for everyone. Expanding the standards of accessibility it causes us to put more effort and attention into the way we design things, and makes the lived world better for everyone. Yeah, a rising tide. Exactly. Thank you for talking about this. I'm actually about to have a mental breakdown. You're capable of predicting those? My brother lives from these assisted programs. If they win, he might actually die or be homeless. Ben675, I've got good news for you. If they win, A lot of people watching the stream might end up dying, okay? Don't worry. It's not going to be just your brother. It's not beginning and ending with the homeless. I'll tell you that much, okay? The Republican Party is openly campaigning on the ethnic cleansing of 15 million Latin Americans. Trust me, it's not the process does not begin and end with your brother. So your brother's in good company. There's a lot of cool people chatting here. In all seriousness, that's why we have to win.